We're gonna have a TV party tonight. Alright! We're gonna have a TV party, alright! Tonight! We got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Everybody's gonna hang out here tonight! Alright! We'll pass out on the couch. Alright! Tonight! We got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Don't talk about anything else. We don't wanna know. We're dedicated to our favorite shows.
And tonight, our favorite show is Insatiable, brought to you by the good people at Netflix. I'm your host, the Mandated Reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified Mr. Mark Rattledge. And joining me tonight to talk about Insatiable, starring of Jessie fame, Debby Ryan, and of Who's the Boss fame, Alyssa Milano, is my good friend and now frequent contributor to a sub-series of shows I'm calling Terrible Women in Television. Ladies and gentlemen, an expert on terrible women, Sean Coma. How do you do, sir?
Because if there's anybody who is perfectly qualified to comment on the issues facing the modern woman, it's me. Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Sean. You're not. And hey, hey, ho, ho, bullshit criticism got to go.
That's a great way to start this podcast tonight, because the whole reason we're talking about this is, look, I was going to watch this because I have kids, and my kids watch the Disney Channel, and there was a show on the Disney Channel called Jessie, as I said, starring Debby Ryan, and I got a kick out of her. You know, as far as Disney kids go, I thought this one had a lot of charisma, more so than the usual screaming into the camera Disney kid. And I always thought as far as, entertaining for an adult goes, I always thought Debby Ryan was funny on Jessie. So I was interested to see her step into something that was non-Disney, something risque, like a Netflix black comedy TV show. So when I saw that she was going to be in Insatiable, I didn't even know what it was about, but I was already interested. Then, turn the page, there's all this controversy that comes out about Insatiable. And I says to Sean Coma, I said, hey, have you seen all this controversy about Insatiable? What is this horsepucky? And he said, that's exactly what it is, horsepucky. And we decided to deconstruct and break it down and give this thing the once-over that we usually say for Genji Cohen shows. But that's all right. We'll gladly adopt Debby Ryan's character into the Nancy Botwin School of Terrible Women. So, Patty, that's her name. So, did you have any interest in watching this before I pitched it to you, saying, hey, this was something I'm interested in talking about?
I was sincerely on the fence about it. I really was. Because I have two particularly close friends who displayed extremely disparate views of it. One was really, really put off by the initial trailers and the talk about the premise of the show, because they're two people who have very differing opinions of the kind of body image that this show deals with, and they're both big. They've both kind of dealt with being bigger women. And one was offended, outraged, swore, and to her credit, was a woman of her word, lived up to her promise that she would drop her Netflix membership if they didn't shit-can their plans to air the show. Another who was coming at it from a very different place, of someone whose weight kind of wreaked havoc on her life for a significant chunk of it, and has spent the last few years successfully improving her health by losing a lot of weight. After she saw it, made no bones about praising it and thinking incredibly highly of it as opposed to the other point of view that it was fat shaming and went down a terribly offensive route by putting an otherwise skinny actress in a bodysuit. The latter acquaintance of mine saw it as very much an authentic, if over-the-top portrayal of a lot of the mental struggles that she's dealt with over the years. And even went so far as to say that it was the kind of show that she's wanted to see for a long, long time, in terms of driving home the point that just being thin will not instantly make anything better. It will not make you a better person in and of itself. It's no magic bullet. And so I was torn over whether I wanted to give this a chance, because instantly I was a little bit taken aback on a certain level when I saw the trailer. But then it also occurred to me, wait a second, this reminds me a lot of tons of other black comedies that I've genuinely loved and seeing as some of the smartest, most snarky, topical entertainment out there. So I'm curious to see if it lives up to that. And so ultimately, when I found out you wanted to review it, I thought, perfect excuse. Let's give this a shot.
So I don't want to spend a tremendous amount of time digging into the controversy. I think it needs to be addressed. I want to say right at the top, I watched all 12 episodes while I was on the cruise over the weekend, and here's the thing, and this is probably the most important point that I can make. I was entertained from episode 1 to episode 12, and at the end of episode 12, I wanted to know what was going to happen next. By any measure, that makes for a successful television show.
Yep.
And that's kind of the end of the line here. For the people out there that feel like every television show needs to have some sort of social agenda, or if it doesn't speak to a social agenda, then it's an abject failure, I have to wonder, what are you doing with your lives? There are...
Mark, you think it's bad with television? I got a suggestion for you. Become a full-time gamer.
Oh, really?
Oh, god damn. Allow me to give you a few of the most recent choice examples. Overwatch gets one of its usually 3 or 4 yearly new characters. It is a hamster rolling around in a machine gun toting mech ball. I read some comments that were genuinely outraged that it wasn't a black woman. There are people who are pissed at Sony's new Spider-Man game for how it depicts police as being an antiquated, sugar-coated view as opposed to the more current one. There were people who were outraged at Far Cry 5 because they felt that it was too political, that it was too much of a direct jab at Republicans and Trump's America and white supremacy and the GOP and so on and so forth. With almost any given game coming out, there's going to be a controversy of some kind. One more for the road here. The controversy over EA's Battlefield 5. According to some people, including too many women to be a historically accurate portrayal of World War II.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Oh, yes, really. Oh, this was a thing. Oh, this was a big thing. This is shit that happens. This is shit that goes on.
Do people have this much time on their hands to be to be looking at a thing and deciding that they're outraged that there's either not enough or too much inclusion, and then getting properly outraged and going on Twitter to complain about it, and then going as far as setting up these stupid petitions that do absolutely nothing. Because they did a petition for this one, 230,000 signatures to get Insatiable taken off the air. Not only does Netflix air the thing, despite this petition, or petitions, it could have been more than one, but they renewed it for a second season. The fact that there's like a cottage industry of people who are just professionally outraged over nonsense in entertainment, I don't know, man. I don't have that kind of time in my life, and I podcast 4 nights a week.
I'm the same way. As a gamer, all the controversies I just rattled off to you, what gradually started occurring to me. Why do you people spend so much time being angry about this insignificant shit? Don't you realize that's time you could be spending playing video games?
So I take this back to Insatiable. The main controversy about this seems to have been that Patty, who is played by Debby Ryan, was not carried on people's shoulders yelling, I'm fat and I'm proud for 12 episodes. And that wasn't the entire length and breadth of the series. The fact that this girl has doubts about herself, that has self-loathing going on, that is echoing any number of people's thoughts about themselves and their weight and their own psychology. This, however, in people's minds, amounted to fat shaming. Look, and to those people who made that complaint and wrote articles upon articles upon articles about it, you couldn't have possibly actually watched the show.
There's no way.
For those that did complain about it and just thought it was mean-spirited, thought it was too over the top, I mean, I think those are legitimate complaints. Look, this isn't going to be everybody's cup of tea. This might not be Sean's cup of tea, and that's fine. There were definitely cringeworthy moments of the show where it almost lost me, and I do want to talk about one specific one where I turned to my wife and I said, I don't know if I'm going to keep watching. This has gotten too stupid.
Was it the roast episode?
No, but God, that was close. No, it was the bathroom fight that led to Bob revealing his feelings for the other Bob.
Oh, yes.
Where I almost threw the phone up in the air that I was watching the show on. We'll get to all that, but yeah, when Bob finally reveals that he's been secretly gay and in love with the other Bob for since they were 14, I was like, all right.
I was after that every single episode. I was waiting for Bob Barnard to reveal that this was all part of some other elaborate ploy, like everything else he's done the entire show.
Yes, but then it had to have ended with him in handcuffs going, and I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids. So we'll get to that, but I wanted to address this at the top of the show so that way we could focus on what's really important here is, was the show entertaining? Were these characters that were even if they were not likable, again, I keep saying the phrase the Nancy Botwin School of Unlikable Women, or at least are they engaging? Is the story engaging? These are the things that are important, not whether or not it speaks to fat people and makes them okay with themselves. Look, I'm a fat guy, and I know that's in the in the world of social justice warriors, it means less than if you're a fat woman. But look, I don't look to TV to validate my feelings, and I don't think you should either. And for people reviewing this thing, looking for it to validate a thing, how about it just needs to do one thing? It needs to be entertaining. And that's what I want to talk about. Whether the show was entertaining, it's certainly not realistic.
No.
I mean, to the point where you could see some of yourself in this, and some of this in yourself, sure. But it's as realistic as Weeds was, and sometimes less so. In the sense that I can't believe people act this way and continue to breathe pure air. So now I can get off my soapbox and I can focus on the fun stuff of this. But just to kind of give a 10-cent synopsis, we have Patty, who is Debby Ryan. We have Bob, who is Bob Armstrong, who is Dallas Roberts. And they are brought together when Patty ends up punching a bum in the face and needs to go to court over it. He, around this time, has been accused of molesting one of his pageanteers, I guess, after she loses a pageant. And he is seeking to redeem himself. She is seeking to redeem herself, and so they are brought together and they are moving forward as a team. Their relationship sort of extends outwards, affecting other people, Bob's family, her friends, etc. And, every episode is sort of dealing with how they affect each other's lives. And that's kind of the show. So let me first say that I thought Debby Ryan did a hell of a job with Patty as a character. Patty is interesting because, I keep saying Nancy Botwin, but I would actually more compare her to Piper Chapman. And there were episodes where I thought she was the worst person ever on television. And then other episodes where I was truly sympathetic to how she was feeling and what she was thinking and how she was acting. And I was like, dude, I get it. I feel you. And then, like I said, other episodes where I was like, you're the worst, and I don't know if I could stand watching you much longer. What was your impression of Debby Ryan's Patty?
Pretty similar to yours, man. You really encapsulated it pretty well. She starts off, you're kind of tricked initially into viewing her as a sympathetic character from the outset of the pilot, only to realize, and again, I think the real turning point where either you realize it fully or it's just flat out lampshaded for you is the charity roast episode. Mm-hmm. In which, to try to rehab her image after damn near killing a young woman, she decides to stage a charity roast for her 18th birthday, in which she's going to sell tickets to give everybody who knows her a chance to come make mean-spirited jokes about her all they want, with the disclaimer that at the end of it, she gets to take a few pot shots of her own. If you can already envision, if you're already thinking, oh, I have a pretty good idea how this turns out, you're not wrong. And everybody gets together, and what you pretty quickly realize, especially when her best friend Nani gets to her portion and she starts rattling off that she can't believe how self-centered Patty has always been, even when she was fat. It's the ultimate way of the show just directly beating you over the head with the moral: being thin does not make you. No, correction. Let me put this more clearly. Being fat does not make you less thin, but being thin does not make you better. It doesn't change who you are inside, period. Because Nani, in fact, eventually storms out when she realizes, you've pretty much been terrible to me most of our lives together. Why do I put up with you? Why am I here at all? Why am I even here to insult you?
She makes a statement. I want to throw this in with what you're saying and let you get back to it. But she makes a very clear statement at that time, which resonated with me and was resounding with that character. And she says, "When I am with you, I lose myself."
Yep. Which not an unusual condition at all among friends. I've experienced it myself at all ages through certain people that I've been around. Certain people have made me better. Certain people have, beyond a shadow of a doubt, brought out the worst in me. kind of a conversation that I had while I was on the road to Utah with my good friend Carrie. And that is Patty. She is somebody who kind of once she actually starts exhibiting a personality, that's exactly what happens. She kind of becomes the center of attention. Or rather more so than she was already trying to kind of make herself previously, because as Nani points out, even when Patty was fat, everything was about her problems, how miserable she was, her body issues, her being picked on all the time. And it was never, ever about what anybody else had going on, what anybody else was dealing with. But while Patty can be kind of amusing, the thing about her is she's not even an entertaining, charismatic cult of personality mean girl. She's just kind of a bland, inept one.
I was going to say, I felt like the way she was portraying the character was that she... there's a line that Bob says when they're... And I want to talk about the whole demon subplot, because I really fucking hated it. And they spent way too long on this. But when she's convinced she has a demon in her because of the unborn twin... And she's saying that, like, the demon's making me do this, the demon's making me do that. And Bob goes, that could also be explained by borderline personality disorder. As a mental health clinician, I laughed my ass off at that line. I think I laughed so hard I woke my wife up, because
it was a throwaway line, but so goddamn true.
Yeah, it was really on the nose, and I don't think the writers even meant it to be as such. Especially the way it's delivered by Bob, but it fucking nails it. You have a person who, no matter what is going on, what is going on in the world, makes herself the center of attention. An orphanage could be on fire, and she's sitting there going, "But what about me? What about Raven?" And to the point that you were making, I think what ends up happening is, She has these moments where she just lashes out, but she lashes out without conscience. It's kind of like, almost to somebody who, like a drinking problem, or something like that, where, or like bipolar disorder, where you're just acting impulsively, and then in the wake of the damage you cause, going, what have I done? But but while you're doing it, you're not thinking. I also think about the end of the roast episode, which I wanted to ask you about this, because this was more of a style directing choice here. But she's now, for the second time, destroyed Bob's life. Her mother has ran off on her. Nani has walked away from her. She is alone in the world, and so she comes home and she eats a sheet cake. She eats her feelings, and and again, while it's not a violent act as such, it's still lashing out. It's still acting without thinking. Separate from all that, though, I was curious. They lingered on that for a really long time. And then even after the image faded, you could still hear chewing in the back, as the credits were playing. What did you think of that?
Powerful moment, and it was a shame that it was pretty much dashed with the way they began the very next episode.
Too long on the shot, too short on the shot. I mean, I was just curious. I thought
it was perfect.
Okay.
And I was really thinking that maybe in the next episode they were going to give this moment some layers. They were going to give it some room to really let it sink in. But nope.
I think
it was we get the Drew Ex Machina, and the wisdom of Drew Barrymore saves her from everything, and of course, by this point she's pretty much mostly still composed, with the exception of once more eating her feelings. But then after that, nope, she's right back on track.
I have to say, one of the things that makes her at least relatable and likable, even in the worst parts of the show, is she at least shows remorse. You know, it's always, she acts out, she blows something up, and then in the next episode, she's reflecting on it going, I did a bad thing.
Yes. And here is where we get into where the show's trailers not only failed it, but utterly sabotaged it. You see, this was what I was interested in. Is it reminded me of two of my all-time favorite comedies, Drop Dead Gorgeous and Jawbreaker. The former of which is a mockumentary about murders surrounding a fictitious beauty pageant in rural Minnesota, and the latter could almost be called a distant ancestor to Heathers. It's one of the movies that really gave Rose McGowan's career the kind of breakout rocket jump that she wanted, which is about a trio of uber popular predatory high school girls who have to cover up an unintentional murder, and they have to do it by going full Taming of the Shrew and making over an unpopular girl, and basically making a total monster out of her because she becomes worse than they could have ever been in terms of her behavior. And I thought that's what this was going to be. That it was going to be an over-the-top black comedy cautionary tale where this young lady played by Debby Ryan was going to go from being a fat nobody to an uber hottie due to accidentally losing a shit ton of weight. And then she was going to go absolutely insane on everybody who had ever picked on her. She was going to make them all pay and become an utter sociopath.
Yeah, it's kind of what I thought the show was going to be.
It's more like she's not a bad person. She's just really terrible at learning to be a good one.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even her fault. On a number of occasions, she's led around by the nose by these pretty much overtly terrible people.
You know what?
But I was going to say, but I was just going to kind of close that out by saying, and what really ends up happening is every step in improving her life it's just one step forward, two steps back.
Right. I think they did a good job of writing her as conflicted, but they also, like I said, and I said this to you off air as well. They did a good job of it. Isn't her premier quality isn't the weight thing. It's that she's half crazy. And she has every right to be half crazy. No dad, mom's an alcoholic, and was passively neglectful. She has all these other issues going on. You can see this person developing that way. I deal with that kind of person all the time. So, in what I do for a living. So it's like I think in that sense I empathized with her, and that the fact that her particular vice happened to have been food and not drugs or something else was just one of many ways this could have expressed itself. Now, I started to cut you off, and I definitely wanted to let you finish, but you set up the perfect transition into talking about Bob Armstrong, because you mentioned like, oh, these are overtly, she's led around by overtly terrible people. And I'll tell you, I didn't get the sense necessarily that Bob was terrible until the second to last or last episode, where he's standing between Alyssa Milano and Christopher Gorham, and they're both telling him, you have to make a choice between us. This isn't going to work as a throuple. or whatever word they used, and he can't do it. And it's funny because I started reflecting on the name of the show, like Insatiable, and you think you're led to believe that this is about Patty's appetite, but really the whole show is about everyone's inability to curb their own appetites. Mm-hmm. And we're not just talking appetites for food, appetites for sex, appetites for attention. Nobody here has any self-control in this show. That's what this is really about. Which, again...
The closest I think anyone gets by the end of the show would be, Patty's mom. Mm-hmm. Definitely comes around in terms of the fact that her ex comes back, wants her to run off with him again, and did I gather this right? She's the one who called the cops on him and got him busted for possession.
Yes, I got the impression that part of it was what was being implied was that he was going to go hit on Patty and try to sleep with her, and that she kind of acted out of rage in getting him arrested. Because he slept with her when she was 14.
Right. But then she also has the sense to realize, I need to extricate myself from this situation to go deal with this properly. And sometimes the biggest thing you can do as a person is just know when to step back to get a true perspective on things. Mm-hmm. And I admired that about her.
But I want to focus on Bob here because, like I said, up to this point, I actually, I didn't see Bob, and maybe this is just my own thing, but I didn't see Bob as a necessarily terrible character, and certainly we don't really get into his ridiculous sense of lack of self-control until Bob Barnard, sorry. Which, just as an aside, one of the worst things about this show, the thing I absolutely hated the most, was every time he said his name, he had to give him a nickname.
Yeah,
that gets old by episode 3.
It has to be a new alliterative, pissy moniker that he dubs him.
Right.
Like Bob Bottle of Biscuits Barnard.
Yeah. They're madly in love, and he's still doing the nickname thing. I'm like, all right, we get it. Enough. This is where there needed to be an adult in the room editing some of these scripts going, all right, knock this off. But I felt like he, in a lot of the situations, was just sort of reacting to things happening to him. He's like constantly putting out fires. And then he gets to this point where he has to choose, and he's like, I can't. And he'd rather kill himself than have to choose between these two people because he has zero, ability to choose between them. And I was like, that takes almost. I mean, we're almost at the end of the season here with this, and I really felt like once they wrote that for him, it colored everything that happened previously to the point where I look back and goes, maybe he's a lot worse than I thought he was, and just didn't see it until it all came bubbling up once all the veneer was ripped away.
Bob Armstrong and, in fact, both of them both characters were a really long way to go for a pretty simple punchline.
Yeah.
It's like somebody who spends 30 minutes setting up an aristocrat's joke, and ultimately the payoff is to get to the other side.
Literally.
Yeah. That's your ultimate punchline, is just, why did the chicken cross the road? To get to the other side. But you could say that about so many characters and arcs on this show, and they're so predictable straight away from the get-go. Christian, Patty's toxic boyfriend, he's the only one I'll kind of give the exception to, mostly just because you wonder just what horrible shit he's going to inflict on somebody next. is the thing. You can, by the time Bob Barnard sort of reveals himself, it's not really shocking.
You know,
it's and you know, just it goes for just about everybody else, including you know, the whole arc with Magnolia. About every turn in that is just about her trying to manipulate Patty and trying to destroy her one way or another. The baptism episode where she buddies up and hands her the cider that's spiked with Molly, which, by the way, also leads to one of the most manipulative scenes in the trailer. The one where she emerges from the baptismal font in the white robe with the sexy red underthings on, and I guess we're supposed to think, oh, look what an unrepentant hussy she's become. No, she had that dreamy, lusty look because she was drugged. And in fact, she had no idea she was drugged. You know, she just downed that whole thing in one shot, and then had a little hallucination of a donut talking about her god-sized hole while she was underwater, and that translated to an epiphany for her.
The show brings the Bobs and Alyssa Milano to the precipice of a polyamorous relationship. And, you know, and I said at the top of the show that I said the show didn't have to have a message. It didn't have to have an agenda. But it can talk about things. It can talk about, you know, I mean, look, some of the reviewers, and maybe rightly so, said it, you know, the things that it talks about kind of badly or, you know, or, you know, with no finesse at all. And, you know, that's probably not unfair. And I think that was my most prominent thought when they're dealing with the subplot of the possible polyamorous relationship. We are culturally dabbling in polyamory now. I know there are people within my circle of friends who are polyamorous. You know, it certainly makes its way.
I've recently been involved in a polyamorous relationship. So
okay, good. You feel free to speak about that if you want.
Okay.
But you know, it's something that culturally I think we're dabbling in now, and I don't know if the show meant to comment on it or just recognize it as a thing that's out there. It's not going to be seen in Iron Fist or Jessica Jones. So,
definitely not.
So this is as good a place as any to shove it in there and, you know, give people something to talk about.
Well, because those properties are owned by Disney. You're not going to see it talked about there for the same reason why we were never going to see a polyamorous tryst between Elsa, Anna, and Hans.
Well, hey, listen, Frozen 2 is going to have Elsa's going to have a girlfriend, so you know Disney's making progress. But you know, it's like the Orville dabbled in, you know, transgender the transgender issue. There was a whole episode that centered around, you know, transitioning a girl baby to a boy baby. It was an alien. Doesn't really make a difference. And I know that when Jesse, Ronnie, and I talked about that produced at least like a 20-minute discussion amongst us, not the least of which was a little uncomfortable for Ronnie, you know, who has some issues with it, as if I remember correctly. You know, when we covered the Flintstones comic by Mark Russell, I think it was the beginning of 2017, same thing there. They were dealing with polyamory and gay marriage and all this other stuff. And again, there was this lengthy discussion that took place. And so I was watching this, and not that I needed the show to champion it or not champion it, but I felt like it was making a inarticulate comment on it.
It really did. It played it for awkward laughs in a way that I hope that all media will eventually stop trying to portray non-traditional relationships, as long as they're still viewed as non-traditional and not just as relationships by the world at large. And I guess it makes sense in part due to the part of the country in which they're depicting this as taking place. I make no bones about that. Having lived in both the Midwest and out in a western state such as Arizona, and well, hell, if you really want to point it out, having traveled to a highly conservative state for the past week and a half when I was in Salt Lake City, Utah, there is a lot of awkwardness that surrounds these topics. From gender identity all the way up to polyamorous relationships. But this felt more like it was kind of mining everything for the classic laugh track laden, wacky misunderstanding sort of tone.
Yeah, this seemed like an episode of Three's Company.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Right down to referring to it as a throuple. Okay. As far as I know from it's experience, but it's limited experience. As far as I know, number one, that's not a thing. I have been kind of the third person for off and on for a little over a year with two people who are in an open marriage. And again, this is not to compare it too much, but in that case, it was an open thing. It came about through some interesting circumstances. But kind of once the communication was all out there in the open, there was understanding among all three parties. It was fine. I lived with them for a while. But man, what to say about the way this was described? I guess I could put it this way. The show that I've always pointed to as an example of one that kind of gets, and again, I hate using the term non-traditional, but screw it, it fits. Non-traditional relationships kind of the most naturally and openly and just normalizing them was a 5-season sci-fi series called Lost Girl, of which I was an enormous fan since I saw the first episode on Netflix and loved it right up until the series finale. And that's a show on which you have bisexual, lesbian, male-male relationships, and none of it is lampshaded or treated as awkward. There's nothing forced about it. They're just relationships. This one, and even referring to it as a throuple was just kind of made me, and it's an instinct that I have as someone who writes for a living, just makes me go, nobody talks like that. Who fucking talks? I think the instant somebody were to refer to it by that, instead of just kind of calling it what it is, saying you want to have an open marriage or something like that, it would make me kind of question whether somebody kind of knew what they were getting into.
Yeah.
If they kind of felt the need to sort of give it a silly name. And And again, this is all just kind of my unique experience. Others may differ, but
I just felt like it wasn't respectful to it.
I feel wasn't.
I feel like the writer sort of saw it as a thing that's out there and was like, let's use this as the butt of a joke.
It wasn't, particularly the line when Alyssa Milano referred to herself as their sex toy.
Yeah, specifically, said, "I'm not going to be a sex toy in this."
Right, and that was the part where I felt like they did kind of inject something genuine, because the impression that I got was Bob genuinely loved them both, and which is also a situation I've been in.
See, here's where I want to stop for a second and just draw a giant circle around Bob, because I never once believe. Was there lust there? Sure. I'll go along with that. I could have been made to believe, with the performances and the dialogue as they were, that Bob Armstrong lusted after Bob Barnard. But it's the kind of lust where I don't necessarily think he really wanted to have sex with him so much as he wanted to wear his skin. You know what I mean?
That, by the time the series drew to a close, that wasn't the impression that I got. I got the impression that once he accepted that side of himself, he genuinely did love them both, and he really couldn't choose and wanted them both to be open to it. And I kind of got the impression that the sex toy remark, I had trouble telling if it was directed at Armstrong or Barnard, saying that he just wanted to occasionally have sex with both of them.
Yeah, well, it followed that line. See, here's where I'm gonna disagree with you. I legitimately don't believe he emotionally loved Bob Barnard. I don't think there's anything in the writing that really points to that. I feel like this whole show is about how this guy emotionally can't deal with the word no. He can't put limits on himself. I feel like
the best way to put it is he has to have everything both ways.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good way of putting it. I feel like he lives in a world, like, his perfect world is one of no limits, no parameters at all. Mm-hmm. And so I don't necessarily, again, I'm not convinced he really did love Barnard so much as I know he wanted his life, and I think there was lust there, but I was definitely convinced that he loved his wife. But again, I think he loved his wife because he saw, like, potential in her. He saw enormous potential in her, and he had an opportunity to guide that potential into something. Like, I think the most hurt Bob got in the entire show was when she said she wanted to go do something on her own, and she didn't want to include him. Like, I feel like he derived purpose out of, in guiding women, essentially, into bettering themselves. Like, that's the thing that really motivated him and got him off. And so it cut him to the core when she was like, I need to do this on my own and be my own person.
He's kind of a life coach who sort of missed his calling.
Yeah, he really was. And I'm not even convinced he's gay. Like, I know that sounds weird because he's, there's several scenes of him having sex with a man. But this is going to sound odd, but just because you have sex with a guy doesn't necessarily, like, Bob kind of says it in the show, what I'm struggling with here, because it sounds almost silly to use these words, but Bob's like, emotionally, I identify as gay. And they were like, but you have sex with women. He was like, yeah, they're like what was it, pillows filled with marshmallows? They feel good. And it's like, see, that's what I'm getting at. I don't think emotionally Bob was gay, Bob Armstrong. I think that there's things that feel good in doing stuff with a man and with a woman. I think there's people who've done both that'll tell you that. I don't think I'm braving new ground here. But I think emotionally that wasn't him, which, someone watching the show or listening to this might struggle with, because like, oh, but he likes all of these female things. And to that I say, so what? Again, liking women's fashion, being into women's fashion doesn't necessarily make you gay either. You know?
It doesn't. And to think that is a highly, highly antiquated line of thinking that thankfully the show kind of, in places, at least tries a little bit, even if it struggles with it, even if it's sometimes inept, to kind of disintegrate.
I said, though, I don't know if I said this on air yet. I know off air I did. The show did almost lose me, though, when that happened. Almost because I didn't think it was believable at that point. I felt like the rivalry between the two Bobs was such that for Christopher Gorham to all of us, or as Bob Barnard, to all of a sudden turn around and be like, I've secretly been harboring love for you, and I've been pulling on your pigtails because I knew I couldn't have you. All right, you're outright torturing the guy at points. Okay, you are actively making his life worse. That's a little more than pulling on his pigtails.
Oh yeah. He tries to utterly destroy him.
On several occasions.
Yeah, it really is a vindictive, conniving rivalry.
Right. That's why when you're like, oh, I don't. Like, you almost don't buy that he's really in love with him. That's also a manipulation and a ploy with another agenda. I'm like, see, that's what I was waiting for. That would have been believable. That Barnard is such a sociopath that he's willing to do anything and stick his penis anywhere to get where he needs to go. Like ultimately, if it was to become mayor or take over that office or whatever. And he felt like tricking Bob into thinking that he wanted a relationship with him was the way to do it. Like, okay, I'm with that. It seems a little cartoon villainish, but at least that's more believable than the guy's genuine affection for Bob Armstrong. And like I said, it isn't so much like, oh, God, the other thing I was sort of struggling with this show was that it's sort of this American Beauty thing where it says, I just feel like Hollywood takes a look at small town America and says, yeah, underneath the veneer of things looking nice and being wonderful, everyone's a horrible piece of shit and homosexual. Like, everyone's gay, everyone stinks, there's not a good person in the suburbs anywhere in America. Like, all right. Hollywood is a city on a fucking hill. And, the rest of the world is flyover country and it's all terrible. It's like, I get a little tired of that.
They're grains of truth. But, yeah, in stories like this, those grains of truth, Hollywood kind of tries to make them the entire recipe.
Yeah.
There's really nothing else holding them together or diversifying the flavor. It really does just come down to that. And this wasn't a show wherein I expected subtlety. I expected black comedy, but it just kind of veered right off into the absurd.
Yeah,
pretty damn quick, and not even always the biting commentary kind either. Lest we get into the shenanigans between Dixie and Magnolia.
I'm going to do something I don't normally do here. I'm going to refer back to a different show that I watched a lot. Not the one everyone thinks I'm going to. In fact, I'm not even going to name it because it's getting to the point where it's become part of the drinking game for this network.
Okay.
But I want to talk about The Shield for a moment.
Good. I grabbed my can of Vanilla Coke Zero just in time.
The Shield was a very entertaining show. That one that one was like a drug. You were hooked from episode to episode, and every season it ended with a cliffhanger that made you wonder what was going to happen next. I don't think The Shield spoke to any larger issue. that wasn't patently obvious. Don't steal money from the Armenians. Good. Got it. Don't murder other cops. Good. Thank you for telling us that, Mr. Sutter. Come on. The Shield wasn't speaking to any greater sense of man. There was no message here. It was just an entertaining show about a dirty cop. And I feel like, as a weird comparison, that's kind of Insatiable. There's no great, there's no speaking to the greater sense of man or man's purpose here. There's no, whether to the degree that there's a message is debatable, but who cares? The whole point of it is just to be entertaining, and and it goes right down to the ending where, where when she kills Christian with the crowbar, or with the tire iron rather. He's saying, you're a bad person. Just give in to it. Stop pretending you're something else. And she, in a fit of rage, beats him, saying, I'm a good person, as she's murdering him. That's dramatic. I enjoyed that bit of television. That, as sort of a window into her insanity, I thought was compelling. And then her calling Bob, and Bob is on the verge of suicide once again. And, and he says, I was going to kill myself, but Patty had other plans. And then he goes to help her, and they create a situation where, well, how the Duke boy is going to get out of this one? With the car floating in the river that's clearly, obviously floating. So, I'm like, that's all it needed to be. I think that this idea that it has to be anything other than entertaining is patently absurd. And I think that's where the show won me over, despite the fact that there were some hiccups. The other thing I really hated, there were three things in the show where it either nearly lost me or I just hated it and I wanted to get past it, and thankfully they eventually do. The other thing was when she finds out that she has a twin, and for a couple of episodes, she's blaming everything on the fact that she has a demon, and I just wasn't interested in what was happening at that point. That was all kind of me with my eyes rolling in the back of my head. But it ends well. It ends with I think it's John Lovitz who says to her, everything that you did is on you, Bubala. And I was like, but it goes to, I think, a problem with the writing of the show that you said before, that it's way too long setups for punchlines that didn't need to be that long of a setup. Mm-hmm. We're talking 3 episodes dealing with a demon just for John Lovitz to say, stop, you're responsible for your own actions, you asshole. Like, that could have been 1 episode. 1. And then the other thing that drove me...
But on the bright side, I must retort with John Lovitz cameo.
Fair enough. And I could listen to John Lovitz calling her Bubala all day long. I'm saying he only needed to do it once, 1 episode. But the other thing I really hated, just because it was like beyond TV unrealistic. It was so stupid it took me out of the show. Is you have Dixie, I think her name is, the Chinese gal, who's hilarious. She's my favorite stupid character on the show because she's so awful. But she's sitting there attacking her on top of the wiener truck, and she's biting her, and in the struggle she's thrown off the truck. I think at the point that she's biting her, whatever happens to her after that has to be understandable. But the way they wrote the show and what's portrayed is that Patty is somehow the villain and all of that. Like, no one stopped it.
Nobody in their right mind would have perceived her as the villain.
Right. Realistically, someone would have gotten up there and broken that apart before she got thrown off the truck. But though I say that, and unfortunately, we had a situation here in Florida where a mother was actively drowning her child in the river, and people were filming it with their phones, going, "Why won't somebody stop her?" So maybe not. I don't know. I'm thinking better of people than they really are. But besides that, never mind all that. You still have a situation where she's biting her and attacking her, and being violent, and in a struggle with no rails, nothing to protect them. She tosses her off the truck, and it's like, and everyone and in real life, all but the most dumbest person would have said, yeah, we get it. She shouldn't have attacked you on top of a truck. Accidents happen. Why don't you come down from there now? Not, oh my God, you nearly killed her. Like, come on. That I felt like the writers were just reaching for anything to continue to paint her as this conflicted, evil character, and it's like, this is horseshit.
Although I loved the visual of Dixie getting the veneers punched off her teeth.
I had to skip forward when Debbie's talking herself up to throwing her out of the wheelchair. I couldn't watch it. It was so, like, I saw it coming. And I knew that Dixie was going to fake being paraplegic. Yeah. I knew that that wasn't going to get her to. I didn't know when they were going to give it away, and they eventually do when she jumps up out of the chair at the roast. But I knew that wasn't going to be the time, and Debbie was going to look like a maniac. I'm like, I can't even watch this.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there are some moments, kind of leading up to that, wherein Patty makes a brilliant point. How can you people think so little of me? This is bullying? What do you call the way you treated me for years?
Right, which fell on deaf ears. Like, as an audience member, it reaches you, but it doesn't reach anyone in the cast. Everyone in the cast is deaf, dumb, and blind.
It's one of the times when the show actually does a halfway decent job of making a point about sort of the culture of the world at large, and that is, sometimes something is indeed not a crime until it happens to a pretty person. It's, everything is okay until it happens to somebody that we like.
Right. I'm going to ask one last thing here, and then I'm going to ask you for your final thoughts, and we'll close this up.
Sure.
The subplot with Beverly D'Angelo as Stella Rose, and then it sort of devolving into her trying to murder Patty and all of that. Your thoughts?
It's a freaking telenovela. That's my thoughts. This is what we kind of built up to all season long, and it's just one convoluted revenge plot after another, and it just doesn't get any simpler or more satisfying.
Did I miss something? Because she says, I think I might have killed Stella Rose. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, I feel like I might have missed something too.
Okay. She uses the cream from the pastry to get out of the cuffs, and then she somehow makes it back to. That's right. Then she takes the wiener truck and drives to registration, and then she goes to meet Christian, and then she goes to meet what's her face, who's in the trunk of Christian's car.
Yeah,
I'm like, that's the sequence of events. I don't know where she would have killed Stella Rose and all that.
Thank you. I thought that maybe I had just tuned out or something during that part and just missed it. But I imagine that's one of the things that we're going to have answered in season 2, in which I almost guarantee you she is going to be proven to be alive.
Yeah, probably.
Mark my fucking word, she's gonna still be alive. But you asked for my thoughts. This is a show that tries to half-ass black comedy, and you simply cannot do that. If you're gonna go dark, if you're gonna go for gallows humor, if you're gonna go for tragedy, unlikable main characters, so on and so forth, fuck's sake, if you're going to make it interesting, you might as well just go whole hog with it. And in fact, another. I'll get to another movie in a second that I would actually both compare this to sort of unfavorably and recommend in terms of this other movie doing it better. But commit to something. Commit to a story. Narrow your focus and commit to characters. I can't, because once more, I also couldn't tell which characters they really cared about. Because the most interesting one damn sure wasn't Debby Ryan. It was everybody else that was built up around her. In fact, it felt like Patty's whole arc became almost a sidetrack at points compared to Nani discovering her sexuality, the Bobs, Bob and Coralie's marriage, Magnolia's struggles with addiction and with the issues kind of brought upon her by her own parents. What I would suggest is, whether you liked the show or not, if you really want to see what great teenage dark comedy looks like, I would strongly recommend Drop Dead Gorgeous, Jawbreaker, and I would also throw in Election as well, to see a lot of the same themes done in a much more entertaining, intelligent, if still over-the-top fashion. If you want to see another story that has much more of a feel-good angle that approaches kind of teenage image and acceptance in kind of a more honest way than Insatiable does, I would actually suggest the recently released movie Sierra Burgess is a Loser, which is kind of a sort of Cyrano de Bergerac-esque tale that stars Barb from Stranger Things. It's still funny in places, but it's not over the top. It kind of has moments where it kind of pulls at your heartstrings a little bit, but it's one for people who prefer happy endings.
Are you done with the show, or are you going to come back for season 2, if for no other reason than to do another TV party with me?
I might give it a shot. I'm still up in the air about that. As of right now, I would say I'm probably done. But then again, I've been having so much fun doing TV Party with you that just might be enough to convince me.
All right, so we'll have to twist your arm into watching season 2 then. Like, I'm really interested in what happens in season 2. I'm curious to see where they're taking this, because they unloaded a lot in this first season between the Bobs, Coralie, and and killing Christian, and possibly Stella Rose. So I'm curious to see what they do with a season 2. My last word on this, and I normally let my guests have the last word, but I wanted to say this earlier. I said it off air. There were people who wanted Patty to never have any self-doubt about her weight, and and then were mad that she wasn't that character, except that character is in the show. It's just not her. It's Dee.
Yeah.
Dee.
Oh, yes. We never got to talk about Dee.
And I feel like, and here's the thing, I don't think Dee's character was in the original script. I feel like somebody gave notes on it and was like, you gotta have a character who's okay about being fat. You will be crucified in the rags. You will be crucified on Twitter if you do not have a character saying, I'm fat and I'm proud. And then they wrote that character. They wrote a great character. She's perfect. She's a fucking Mary Sue. Okay? She walks on water. She's Black Jesus. And then people complained anyway. Because it's not Debby Ryan. It doesn't matter. Poor gal. But, there she was. She was right out there saying all the right things, doing the right things, and she barely makes any mistakes in the shows. I think at one point, and I could see her point of view. It was like, you love me until Patty walks in the room, and then I don't matter anymore. This isn't the basis of a great relationship for me. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I've been there. Go D. But it definitely felt like she got added in after the fact, and she was only put there to try to make the critics happy.
Didn't work.
Nope. Miserable failure.
Made me happy. I loved her.
Oh yeah, I thought she was great. Like I said, she's a flawless character. Good for her. So I think that's it. Was there anything left unsaid? Anything else you wanted to talk about?
Not really, except that if you do want to give it a try, I cannot urge you enough. Either ignore the previous reviews or try your very level extra most bestest to put them out of your head, because this show really didn't deserve the controversy that it got. Not that I think it's necessarily better than the controversy in terms of quality. It certainly has its problems. But if you came in expecting something that dark, you were sold a bill of goods right from the offset.
I mean, if you like the kind of TV show where everyone's lying to each other and there's triple crosses and by the end of it everything's on fire and nobody knows what happened, this is as good a show as any.
Yeah.
Debbie, and if Debby Ryan tickles your bag, there are far worse things you can be watching than 12 episodes of Debby Ryan, looking her cutest on camera. I mean, honestly, I think this is a great selling point of the show. Debby Ryan's hot. So with that, there you go. Rattlers and Broadcasting. Watch Insatiable. Debby Ryan's hot. So with that said, there was no TV party for Cloak and Dagger this week because our air conditioning broke and we fled like Jacob, and I'm not rescheduling it at this point. I got to move on to bigger and better things.
By the way, that's another show I've started watching recently.
Cloak and Dagger?
Yeah. I took in the pilot while I was out of town because it was expiring on Hulu.
Yeah, it starts a little slow, but about midway through, it really starts to gear up, and by the end of it, it's probably the most different, most interesting superhero show you're going to see on TV.
So wait a second, is the show currently ongoing, or is it?
It ended over the summer, season 1,
okay,
and it's been renewed for a second season.
I was going to say I dug the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only episode that I've watched so far, but hot damn, I really liked it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. This Saturday, we're going to do a pair of shows, myself and Ronnie Adams. First, we're going to do a Screaming Boy on the DC Universe app that just actually launched today. It was supposed to launch on Saturday, but it's up now. You can get it. You can download it for your Apple devices or your Android devices or your Roku.
Is this the bullshit streaming service that stole Young Justice from Netflix?
It certainly is, Ollie. So we're going to...
Yeah, fuck the DC app.
Yeah, kind of.
What's it called again?
DC Universe.
Yeah, fuck you, DC Universe.
So that's kind of the name of the show, probably, because after playing with it today, I have some things to say about it. But so Ronnie and I are going to do a Screaming Boy on the DC Universe app, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then we're going to follow that up with a TV Party Tonight extra commentary on the DC animated universe movie Superman Doomsday. Why is Doomsday? One, because they actually just released, they redid the movie and they called it The Death of Superman. So I think it's fun to go back and look at the first shot at this. Also, it was of all the movies we talked about doing a commentary over, this was the only one that was on there. We were going to do Superman Unbound, but it's not on the app, so meh. Anywho, next week it's Predator Week all week long. We're going to be doing Archie versus Predator on Source Material. Damn You Hollywood's going to review the Predator, which comes out Friday. We'll review the new Corporal Cloney on the Metal Hammer of Doom. And then Sean and I are back again. Oh, if you can't get enough of me and Sean, here we go. We're going to be doing an on-trial for Predators. I believe I'll be prosecuting and Sean will be defending. So there you go. The following week, we've got some Iron Fist for you. We'll be doing the last Iron Fist story, the Immortal Iron Fist, Volume 1, issues 1 through 6. And we'll follow that up with a TV Party Tonight, myself and Robert Winfrey, for Iron Fist, Season 2. And on the Metal Hammer of Doom, review the new Therapy. In the archives right now are Snagglepuss, Exit Stage Left, for all you lefties out there. We had a raucous discussion about that, myself and Ronnie. So give that a listen. We had definitely some interesting topics came out of that book. And then last night on the Metal Hammer of Doom, we reviewed The Book of Bad Decisions by Clutch, their latest album. That's what I got going on. What say you, Sean?
Nothing much so far. I'm still kind of decompressing after coming back from vacation. You can find me on Twitter at Comer Codex. If you happen to have a PlayStation Network ID, I am almost always down for some games of Overwatch and Dead by Daylight. My PSN is Sean C. Comer. Join me any old time. I've got a new blog coming sometime late next week at comercodex.wordpress.com. Some reflection on how gaming has helped me work through depression and anxiety. So, or rather the beginning of a discussion on that. That's a really layered topic. And coming sometime next week, I'm going to have my written review of the Banner Saga 3 coming to W2Mnet Gaming. So check that out. Spoiler alert. It is a great game that badly needs a multiplayer mode. Badly needs either a multiplayer or a quick play or both, because it's a sequel that does not stand up well just entirely on its own. Anyway, so that's that. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Sorry if I sound a little bit off. Again, I'm still kind of recuperating from a lot of work and a lot of leisure, but I wouldn't change any of it for the world. But thank you again. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening, downloading everywhere good times are had. I'm Sean. You're not, and never dull your colors for someone else's canvas.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us on a TV party tonight. Be well, be safe, and behave.